and ministerial decision-making. There are two definitions I really want to use, Mr. Speaker, out of the dictionary. One is the opinion of the minister is reasonable. The minister's discretionary power cannot be delegated to another person. Any decision regarding the exercise of the discretionary power must be made by the minister personally. And the second one is the freedom to decide what should be done in a particular situation. Now, Mr. Speaker, most of the acts, and I took examples from two that fall under the Ministry of Public Works, that set out what ministers' responsibilities are. And so, in one case, in terms of speaking to directions that the minister can give in two boards and committees, it states the minister may, after consultation with the corporation, give to the corporation directions of a general character as to the exercise and performance by the corporation of its functions, including the exercise of rights conferred by the holding of interest in companies in relation to matters which appear to him to affect the public interest. And the corporation shall give effect to any such directions. There's also the power to give direction to the corporation under this section shall, notwithstanding the limitation therein in the giving of directions of a general character, extend to the giving of the corporation of directions of a general or specific character which appear to the minister to be requisite to secure that the corporation's functions are exercised and performed in the most efficient manner. And the last one I'd like to read, Mr. Speaker, is the removal of a member. The minister may at any time revoke the appointment of any member other than the ex officio members if he considers it expedient to do so. Now, I lay that groundwork, Mr. Speaker, because I want to set out that those things that I just read are parts of an act. So they're part of the law of this country. Laws that the PLP government have never touched in terms of changing what I read. We inherited those and we're following those. Now, I know that those laws were written with the full expectation that a PLP minister would never be making those sorts of decisions. Those decisions would be made by those who were chosen to be ministers of the government. But I, being a soldier, Mr. Speaker, am used to following rules before I became a soldier. It's a little bumpy ride to get to following rules, but I've learned over the years to figure out what the rules are and then operate within them. And so, Mr. Speaker, the Act often says the minister shall. And that means he can do, after the deliberation and consultation with his staff and experts and what have you, he can use his judgment or his discernment or his decision-making processes to come up with a decision. So, I know that there's no shortage of people in this country who believe to themselves that they could do a better job than every minister in the PLP government. They don't have no hesitation in telling us so. Now, that's not consultation. That's trying to get you to do what they want as opposed to following the process and carrying out the promises that we made. So, Mr. Speaker, I say all of that to say how bemused I was this week by some of the false outrage and criticism over the demolition of a slave house. And I say this has more to do with genuine outrage. I find it peculiar, Mr. Speaker, at the very least, as a black man, I have been lectured, criticized, and condemned by a whole host of white organizations and white people in this country about not honoring our national hero, Mary Prince, all for ordering the demolition of a slave master's house, Watlington House. It's not named Mary Prince House. Mr. Speaker, I cannot even begin to express how confused and incensed I am by the suggestion that, and the media reported this, and this is the reason for justifying the criticism, that a 12-year-old girl was sent to this house to be prepared to be sold by her own mother. Mr. Speaker, I can't even get past the fact that I find that completely abhorrent. I don't understand why the house is historic. It should have been knocked down years ago, in my humble opinion. It should. And the fact that the place is dilapidated, and some say we done that deliberately, and had to be knocked down, means nothing to no one. Because all of the entities that have trotted out to say it should be saved, and they do that at every building we try and knock down, and say that it's historic, not one of them offer up 2 cents to restore the building. They want the Bermudian taxpayer to do it. Mr. Speaker, I'm really lost for words. But in this situation, I am truly lost for words. Mr. Speaker, I am a direct descendant of slaves in this country. My maternal grandparents were slaves. So in 2023, their great-great-great-grandson ain't standing for any of the stuff that they had to stand for. Mr. Speaker, I and my 5 siblings were raised by Alice and George Burch of Somerset and were taught who we are and whose we are. And were raised to stand up for what we believe is right and correct. And that's how I've approached my responsibilities in this ministry. The only difference is I usually, on major decisions, not just in the ministry, but in my life, take a vote. And usually it's 3-0. And in this case, it's 6-0 because we voted twice. Mr. Speaker, I know that people in this country for going on 25 years now have called me the same names that my parents wouldn't call me. And Mr. Speaker, it rolls off my back. But I would have thought that they would have been bright enough to figure out that what you think and say about me has nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing. And so for all of the people that race to the Royal Gazette to put their comments, I don't read them. So I know what you think, but I can't quote you. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, I'm probably not going to be doing this for too much longer, so they'll be cheering. But whilst I intend doing the job that I've been asked to do to the best of my ability. And I will use the same criteria that I've used since I started doing this. Weigh up the decision. I'll give you a practical example, Mr. Speaker, because they oftentimes think they're slick. So, do I want to name them? Name them? Okay. The Bermuda National Trust, Mr. Speaker, who are one of my favorite people because they are first in line to set out in specific language what I should be doing and the risks for not following their instructions and what have you. I think they think that the PS and I don't chat, but we actually have a very good working relationship. I share with him stuff that I do most of the time, and he shares with me. And by most of the time, I will say, I'll qualify it like with this. If I'm going to make a decision that he needs plausible deniability, he will pass the lie detector test, because he can honestly say, I don't know anything about what that man did. And I'll give you a practical example of this. We've been trying to knock down buildings. And so we had a list. And I've learned a few things about that business that, they call it mobilizing when you bring the bulldozers and you stop to take things away. So we had two buildings, one at the National Sports Center and one across the street from there. And I said, if we're going to mobilize for one, we might as well arrange to knock down both buildings at the same time. That means doing all the paperwork. So they decided they were going to knock it down and not tell me. But coincidentally, the PS and I were driving by, and they were working on the building at the National Sports Center, so we stopped. And I asked the guy, I said, are you going across the street after you finish this one? And he said, no. I said, oh, really? I said to the PS, Burch beef pies. He said, no problem. And so off he went to get beef pies. I called the company and I said, we had a deal. Mobilization once, knocked down that other building too. And I never said anything to him because I knew that at some point, the Deputy Premier's Department Planning would come and say, you knocked down the building. And I never lied, so I said, me. And so the PS was able to, he came and said to me, somebody's knocked down that building. Do you know anything about it? I said, PS, I ordered the building to be knocked down. And he says, I don't know nothing about it. I said, that's exactly right. You're not supposed to be in this. I am. I say that to say, Mr. Speaker, that I think most of the ministers that the PLP has produced in government have approached this job with the view that they're going to do the best they possibly can at what it is they've been asked to do. And I think that in the main, the civil servants are committed to doing a good job, many of them, not all of them. You know the ones I have challenges with. But what I do want to say, Mr. Speaker, and I'll close on this, is that I don't think I'm made different. I think I was raised different. And that is, I don't have an issue with making decisions and accepting the responsibility for when they go wrong. Because 99% of the time, they're going to go right. And I've been doing this long enough to smile at various things that I've done that people criticize up the yin yang, and now that they forget that I was the one who did it, they sing its praises. They'll go back to criticizing if I started naming some of those things. But I smile at the fact that this job allows you the ability to affect change and to help people, and particularly public works. I asked to be in this job because I wanted to be in a position where I could help people right where they live, not just the people in my district, but the people throughout the country. And whilst I get from most of the people in this room emails about issues in their district, I try and fix them all. I started to tell a story about the National Trust, and so they wrote about their Palm Sunday walk. And they didn't write to me. They wrote to the PS to ask for permission. And here's a good PS. He said, Minister, here's this. And so I saw the email, I read it, and I went back to him and I said, I note that the National Trust wrote to you for permission and not to me. They're obviously still annoyed with me. I said, but I'm a big boy. I have no objections to them walking on government property. And so I approve. But I just smiled because that is petty. That is childish. And I could have been equally so by saying no. But I know the number of people in this country that enjoy National Trust walks. And so I said, without any hesitation, other than the fleeting moment of pettiness, I'm thinking, I should do this. And then I said, it ain't worth the hassle. It's not the right thing to do. I rise every day, Mr. Speaker. And before I leave my house, both of my parents are in heaven. And so that's why, and they used to lecture a lot. And so that's why I get irritated when strangers try and lecture me. Because there's nobody left on earth who can lecture me. They're in heaven. But I don't leave my house any day without thinking, honor thy father and thy mother all the days of my life. I thank them now for being disciplinarians and being not afraid to use the rod of correction. But it's held me in good stead. And I shall continue to do this job to the best of my ability for as long as I have the opportunity to do so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution this evening?